For centuries, humans assumed intelligence was ours alone. We were wrong. These animals have been thinking, planning, deceiving, and problem-solving in ways science is only beginning to understand. The crow has a brain the size of a walnut. It also outperforms chimpanzees on certain cognitive tests. Crows belong to the corvid family, alongside ravens, jays, and magpies, and their brain-to-body ratio is comparable to that of great apes. The structure responsible for complex cognition in mammals is the neocortex. Crows do not have one. Instead, they evolved a completely different neural architecture that arrives at the same cognitive outcomes through a different biological path. The same intelligence built twice, by evolution, independently. New Caledonian crows manufacture tools. Not use them, manufacture them. They select specific plant stems, strip away unnecessary material, bend the tip into a hook, and use the finished tool to extract insects from bark. When researchers take the tools away, crows fashion new ones. When given a problem requiring a tool they have never encountered, they engineer a solution from available materials without prior training. In one experiment, crows were presented with a series of tubes containing food, reachable only by using a tool, retrievable only by using a different tool. The crows solved the multi-step sequence without trial and error. They planned it. Crows recognize individual human faces. They remember faces for years. They hold grudges. Wildlife researchers who trap and ban crows for study have reported being followed, scolded, and dive-bombed by those same birds for months afterward. The crows communicate the threat to their offspring. The next generation harasses researchers they have never personally encountered, but have been taught to identify. They also play. Young crows slide down snow-covered rooftops repeatedly for no functional reason. They steal objects with no nutritional value. They hide food and then check whether other crows watched. If watched, they relocate the cache. They understand the concept of being observed and act accordingly. The octopus has no skeleton, no social structure, no parental guidance, and a lifespan of 1 to 3 years. It learns everything it knows alone, in that time, from scratch. Its nervous system is unlike anything else on Earth. 2/3 of its neurons are not in its brain. They are distributed throughout its 8 arms. Each arm processes information and solves problems semi-independently. The octopus does not fully control its limbs the way vertebrates do. It issues general commands, and the arms execute with local intelligence. Octopuses in laboratory settings escape from their tanks at night, cross the floor to adjacent tanks containing fish, eat them, and return to their own tank before researchers arrive in the morning. This was documented not from cameras, but from missing fish and a wet trail on the floor. When cameras were installed, the behavior was confirmed. They recognize individual humans. They have been documented showing consistent behavioral preferences toward specific researchers, approaching some, spraying others with water from their siphon. Deliberate, targeted, remembered. Mimic octopuses identify which specific predator is threatening them and transform their body to impersonate that predator's natural enemy. Not camouflage, impersonation. When threatened by a damselfish, the mimic octopus flattens its arms to resemble a flatfish that specifically preys on damselfish. It selects the correct mimicry for the correct threat. The problem this poses for neuroscience is fundamental. Everything we understand about how intelligence develops assumes social learning, extended lifespan, and accumulated experience. The octopus has none of these. It builds sophisticated cognition in complete isolation in under 3 years and then dies. Where this intelligence comes from and how it develops so rapidly remains one of the most genuinely unsolved questions in animal science. Elephants pass the mirror test. They recognize themselves in their own reflection, a cognitive benchmark passed by only a handful of species on Earth, including great apes, dolphins, and humans. They bury their dead. Not in a metaphorical sense. They cover deceased elephants with soil, branches and leaves, and return to the site repeatedly over years. When researchers placed the bones of deceased matriarchs along paths used by their herds, the family members stopped, touched the bones with their trunks, and stood in what behavioral scientists describe, cautiously, as vigil. Elephants have specific vocalizations that function as names. Individual elephants respond selectively to the call that corresponds to them, and not to calls corresponding to other elephants. They have been using individualized referential signals, names, in their communication system. Their memory is not a myth. Matriarchs carry spatial and social information accumulated over 60 years of experience. During drought, older matriarchs lead herds to water sources they visited decades earlier. When the matriarch dies, younger herds without that accumulated knowledge make worse decisions and have higher mortality rates. They demonstrate empathy in documented behavioral terms. Elephants comfort distressed herd members with touch and soft vocalizations. They have been observed attempting to assist injured or dying individuals, including their own calves, for extended periods. They cooperate on tasks requiring coordinated, simultaneous action in ways that require understanding another individual's role and timing. The elephant brain contains a higher density of neurons in the cerebellum than any other animal, including humans. Their total neuron count exceeds that of humans. What this means for the nature of their intelligence is still being studied. What it confirms is that the assumption of human cognitive uniqueness has never been more fragile. Rats were used as the default laboratory animal for most of the 20th century because researchers assumed their cognition was simple and consistent. It is neither. Rats demonstrate metacognition. They know what they do not know. In experiments where rats were offered a choice between taking a difficult memory test or skipping it, they consistently chose to skip tests they were likely to fail and attempt tests they were likely to pass. This requires not just memory, but self-assessment of memory, thinking about thinking. They show empathy under controlled experimental conditions. When rats were placed in a situation where they could obtain food by pressing a lever that also delivered a mild shock to another rat, they stopped pressing it. Some stopped eating entirely when the alternative caused distress to another individual. This effect was stronger between rats who had previously experienced the shock themselves. In a more direct experiment, rats were presented with a trapped companion in a small restrainer alongside an unobtainable chocolate treat, their favorite food. The rats freed the trapped companion before accessing the chocolate. When both the companion and the chocolate were simultaneously available, the rats freed the companion and then shared the chocolate. They laugh. Not audibly to human ears, rat laughter occurs at ultrasonic frequencies around 50 kilohertz. When rats are tickled or engaged in rough play, they produce these calls consistently and seek out the researcher who tickled them. Rats deprived of play and tickling show signs of anhedonia, reduced capacity for pleasure, consistent with depression in humans. The rat is not a simple reflex machine that researchers spent a century using as a convenient proxy. It is a socially complex, empathetic, self-aware animal that has been running mazes for us while apparently understanding more about the situation than we assumed. Dolphins have names, not learned labels, self-generated signature whistles developed individually and used consistently by other dolphins to address them specifically. When a dolphin hears its signature whistle produced by another dolphin, it responds. When it hears a different dolphin's whistle, it does not. This is referential communication between individuals using individually generated arbitrary signals. By the most conservative definition, it is language behavior. They form political alliances of documented complexity. Male bottlenose dolphins in Shark Bay, Australia, operate in nested alliance structures up to 3 tiers deep. First-order alliances of 2 or 3 males cooperate to control access to females. Second-order alliances between first-order groups cooperate against rival second-order alliances. Third-order alliances form between second-order groups for large-scale competitive events. Humans were assumed to be the only species capable of reasoning about relationships between groups they are not personally part of. Dolphins manage a three-tier political system in the open ocean. Dolphins in Shark Bay also use tools. Female dolphins carry marine sponges on their rostrums while foraging along the seafloor. The sponge protects their snout while probing rocky substrate. The behavior is cultural. It is taught by mothers to daughters and has been tracked across generations. Male dolphins in the same population do not use this technique, demonstrating cultural differentiation within a single population. They have passed the mirror test. They use signature whistles of deceased companions in contexts that researchers have carefully described without using the word grief, but cannot fully explain by any other framework. The dolphin brain contains spindle neurons, a cell type previously believed to exist only in humans and great apes, associated with social cognition, empathy, and self-awareness. Dolphins evolved them independently. Intelligence did not begin with us. In many cases, it did not peak with us either. Chimpanzees share approximately 98.7% of their DNA with humans. The behavioral and cognitive implications of the remaining 1.3% have been the subject of scientific debate for decades. The evidence increasingly suggests the gap is smaller than that number implies. Chimpanzees in the wild use a documented toolkit of distinct implements for distinct tasks. Stone hammers to crack nuts, leaf sponges to drink water, stripped sticks to extract termites, and sharpened sticks used as spears to hunt smaller primates. Tool use is cultural. Communities separated by geography use different tools for the same problems. The chimpanzee equivalent of regional technology differences. Their short-term memory is faster and more accurate than human short-term memory under controlled conditions. In a test developed by researchers at Kyoto University, numbers 1 through 9 were displayed briefly on a screen and then masked. Human adults and chimpanzees were both tested on recall. The chimpanzees were consistently faster and more accurate. A young chimpanzee named Ayumu became famous for outperforming every human tested against him, including memory champions. Chimpanzees understand death in ways that disturb researchers to document. Mothers carry deceased infants for days and sometimes weeks. Communities fall silent after the death of a high-ranking member. These behaviors go beyond what can be explained by simple behavioral conditioning. They also wage war. Long-term studies at Gombe and elsewhere have documented systematic lethal raiding between chimpanzee communities, groups of males patrolling territorial borders and attacking isolated individuals from rival groups. The strategic patience, coordination, and apparent intent of these raids match criteria that would be called warfare in any species other than our own. The 1.3% difference between chimpanzee and human DNA contains language. That is significant. But the cognitive architecture behind language, planning, memory, tool use, politics, grief, warfare, appears to exist on both sides of that boundary. Fish are not where most people look for evidence of sophisticated cognition. The cleaner wrasse is about to change that. The cleaner wrasse is a small reef fish whose ecological role is to remove parasites from larger fish. It operates cleaning stations on reefs where other fish queue and wait to be serviced. It manages a client base. It adjusts its behavior depending on whether it is being observed by potential future clients. When observed, it provides better service. When not observed, it cheats. This is reputation management. In 2019, cleaner wrasse passed the mirror test. This result was controversial because the mirror test was designed around primate behavior, and the methodology has been disputed when applied to fish. But the behavior observed was unambiguous. The fish examined their own reflections, checked their own bodies for marks, and attempted to remove marks from themselves after seeing them in the mirror. No coaching, no prior training, no social context that would explain the response. Cleaner Wrasse also demonstrates something researchers call pro-social behavior. They provide services to client fish even when there is no immediate personal benefit, apparently maintaining long-term cooperative relationships across multiple interactions. The fish brain is small. It lacks a neocortex. Every neural structure associated with higher cognition in mammals is absent. And yet the behavior produced by whatever the cleaner Wrasse has instead includes self-recognition, strategic deception, reputation management, and long-term social reasoning. The lesson of the cleaner Wrasse is not that fish are smart in the way mammals are smart. The lesson is that intelligence is not one thing built one way. It is a set of outcomes that biology has found multiple paths to produce. We have been looking for minds shaped like ours. The animal kingdom has been building minds shaped like nothing we imagined. Every animal on this list was underestimated. Some were used as laboratory tools. Some were classified as instinct-driven automatons. Some were considered so cognitively simple that their suffering was not considered worth measuring. The science changed. The assumptions did not keep up. Crows that remember faces, octopuses that plan escapes, elephants that mourn their dead, rats that choose empathy over food, dolphins running three-tier political systems, chimpanzees with faster memory than humans, fish that manage their own reputation. What this evidence collectively suggests is not that these animals think like humans. It is that thinking, in its many forms, is not a human invention. It is a biological solution that evolution has arrived at repeatedly through different architectures in different bodies across hundreds of millions of years. The question was never whether animals are intelligent. The question was whether we were paying close enough attention to notice. We are starting to notice. The answers are more extraordinary than anyone predicted.